Hey guys, it's Coffee. I'm back for another spin at the 15s. We're just playing a game against some random player. Don't know anything about him. I'm just going to be playing my readless game. So I do limp the bottom trash. I found historically it does significantly better than open folding and still better than min raising. And the idea is that we limp and then we stab post flop. It's a very profitable strategy and it works really well. So I do that with a lot of hands and I keep to make sure I'm using the right HUD. And oops, I forgot to save the layout. Not sure why. I thought I had it saved. All right. So anyway, so we got ace-8 off versus a limp, and this is a really good spot just to open shove for value. There's not much reason to raise because you don't do very well when called, and so you're not really happy building a pot, and you also don't really induce versus a readless player. They're not going to be limp shoving low ace-x and then folding it to a shove. If he's limping a low ace-x, he probably calls a shove anyway. So you do get some value shoving is the idea. And on top of that, you fold out a lot of hands that have a lot of equity share. So again, I'm limping the bottom of my range and then just stabbing post. This is a rather good board because we hit a gut shot. And then this gets really close when he does float us on this texture. So because of the texture, there's room for him to be floating some overcards. And there's room for him to possibly fold some 2x. So I am going to barrel. There are a lot of hands that float this kind of ace-2-5 board, and we anticipate him to have very little pure value. And he shoves over, and we're really happy to fold at this point. It's a massive overbet, so, he's likely protecting some sort of 2-pair. So this is a huge bet, and this is where we start thinking. And Jack 10 off is starting to look like, maybe it's a call. It depends a lot on his range. I am just going to hero fold it, but I do think that if I had Jack 10 suited, I would be flatting. And by the way, it's not a spot to be like, oh, I can only shove or fold. You can still flat there. You're still probably going to do better flatting with some hands than 3-bet shoving because we have no fold equity. So a hand like Jack 10 suited still is going to hit enough boards where you can call a shove on the flop. But you'll still have some boards where you can fold, and that's a big deal. So here again, I was just limping a low hand. This is kind of close to a min raise, but I still like limping it because it doesn't hit a lot of boards. So I'd rather stab it post flop. And we can actually value bet here. Right, there's more jacks than queens in his range at this point, both because he checked back and because we have a queen. And then there's also flush draws, straight draws. And on the river, this is really close now because we really want his jacks to call here. And he did check raise, shove us on a turn. I think I am going to value bet, and I'm going to value bet really small just to get some crying calls out of Jack X. The idea there is that, again, he has more jacks than queens in his range, so we can value bet. We should have more than 50% equity versus his range. It's really, really thin, though. So here, I'm actually going to raise this as a bluff. I found that actually raising over bluffs versus recreational players is really good versus randoms. You just get a lot of folds, and then you get a lot of folds to the ISO, to the C-bet post. As this is called, in the coffee hut, that's called an ISO C-bet. So immediately I got the 100% fold to ISO C-bet, so it does keep track of that, keeps track of how much they ISO C-bet as well. So here's 16.3. This is really close between limping and min raising. I am going to still min raise this hand. It's not quite really middling. We're not really happy limp flatting it, so I'm just going to min raise it as a bluff. We hadn't actually min raised before either, so we should get at least. Well, the idea is we might get a little bit extra credit. So again, I'm just going to keep raising. Here's a bluff. And I'm just using sort of as small a sizing as I think we'll still get some folds. Arguably, maybe we should use 80. It depends a lot on your perception of the population. Like, what kind of size are they going to fold some of their junk? I tend to believe 70 is big enough, but I could see an argument for maybe raising to 80 might sort of cross them over that threshold. And here, we do hit bottom pair, but because we have bottom pair of twos, we really still want to fold out some equity share. So we're still happy turning our hand into a bluff, and we can think of it as a semi-bluff. We still have equity when called, which is nice. But when called, we do anticipate to be behind. It's not a value bet. So here, I'm just going to keep limp stabbing. Again, pretty close to a min raise, but our hand doesn't really hit boards. And this is another spot where I'm going to raise based on the population tendencies. This is a spot where this min bet range in limped pots tends to be very weak. Historically, I've had a lot of folds raising small over it. I get somewhere around, I think, 60% fold, which is really, really high. So I take all of my bluffs and raise there. I'm very exploitable. Versus recreational players, I just raise everything, everything that's a bluff, and I call with my value because I perceive it to be such a weak range. This is really close. We're 10 big blinds deep. I do usually play this hand. I'm going to min raise fold. I found that historically the population folds enough between pre-flop and on the flop, and they still don't 3-bet that much. And again, I haven't been min-raising much. I should still get some credit. And again, I'm just going to continue min-raise folding. Around lower than 8 big blinds, I stop min-raise folding, and I start limping a lot of my junk. But I still play really high VPIP. And again, here we just get to bet really small just to fold out his air hands. And we fold. Oh, well. We do anticipate 4s and flush draws and stuff to shove, but it's just not going to be a big enough part of his range to stop getting a lot of fold equity betting small. A pretty close shove with pocket 2s. So here again, this is really close between limping and min-raise folding. I'm just going to keep trying to min-raise fold this junk, though. He has folded historically. He's never 3-bet us shallow, so we're pretty happy with it. This is a pretty bad board texture for us. But I still think the population is fit fold enough. We're betting so small that we really need very few folds. And we're happy to fold to his check raise. Notice that he has check raised us a number of times. Now we're starting to get this read. 2 out of 2, not a big sample, but that is telling us something. He's telling us probably he raises more than the population. So this I could bluff, but I'm going to check back because it's still connected. It still has some value. I would rather bluff weaker hands in a sense. And we're just check folding this flop. So many hands hit that board texture, and we're just shutting down. We can maybe argue for betting turn because his range is capped, but I think we actually get quite a lot of value in this kind of spot. There's some slow plays. There's still some weak pairs that check back flop and never fold. I'm sorry, so here we're really shallow, and at this point we can just open shove for value. Population tends to call open shoves a little bit wider than they 3-bet shove anyway, so there's no reason to min-raise call to induce at that kind of stack depth. Here I'm going to try to limp. So again, we're not as happy min-raise folding. He hasn't been folding our C-bets, so we can try limping. And 10-6 off also limps pretty well because it hits more draws. It's not as unhappy about when villain checks back. Again, I think this is a little too strong to be bluffing with, so we just check back. And we do hit a flush draw, and this is a pretty dry board, so I'm going to stab out. I stab on dry boards in limped pots, as you get so many folds. And in particular, that board is pretty dry, but we had a little bit of added equity share, making our bluff even better. So this is pretty shallow. I'm still going to open shove here. Again, it's for thin value. We don't want to min-raise call to induce. We don't want to limp and give him equity at the bottom of his range. So he's been limping a lot, so I'm really comfortable shoving here as a sort of semi-bluff. This is sort of like shoving ace-4 off deeper stacked over a mid-raise. The idea is we have blockers. We have a little equity when called, depending on his calling range, and overall we do okay. I'm actually going to try a trap here. He hasn't been 3-betting much. He hasn't ever called or open shove, but he has ISO'd before. It's a really small sample, so this is maybe a little fancy. But ace-10 suited plays so well post that I'm not super upset about it. And here I'm going to check back. I want to be pretty polar because we're very shallow and villains check raise a lot. So I just want to try to realize my equity share better by checking back. I don't want him to check raise me off my equity share. And this is actually really close. So we have like the nut best bluff catcher here, and we've checked 2 streets on this kind of texture. I am going to hero call. I don't anticipate being correct that often. But given his sizing, we need to be right a third of the time. And I do think he will bluff. He's been pretty aggro. So I think we do get a bluff occasionally there. I do think it's a lot of full houses. It's sad. I mean, especially with the pot size bet, it's really close to hero folding because those pot size bets do tend to be really strong. But we do have a little bit of reads. It's not completely readless. He's been, again, somewhat aggro, somewhat active. We're certainly under-repping ace high there. We're 8.5. I'm still going to try to shove as a bluff. Again, he's been limping a lot and been willing to limp fold a lot. That is a depth where you got to be a little suspicious, though. A lot of players do like to trap a lot. And here I'm just going to try to limp again. It's pretty close again to a min-raise fold. But again, we're suited. We have a lot of equity post as well. And this time he shoves, and we feel stupid. All right, so now we're 7.1, and I'm starting to anticipate quite a lot of traps. We've raised him quite a lot. And so this isn't as dry a board anymore because he has a lot of traps. I'm just going to check fold. It's really close to still stabbing because we do have a gut shot. And I'm just gonna, but my read is that he's probably somewhat trap heavy, given the stack depth, given how much we've shoved over him, and so I think that we can still put a lot of slow plays in his range. So you're 6.1. We're open shoving. This is not a good hand to induce with because it loses so much value whenever villain calls. Every hand has equity to call, so whenever villain checks behind, that's bad for us. Whenever villain flats us, that's bad for us. All right, and so here I'm going to, again, keep trying to limp. It's getting closer because he has ISO'd us a bunch, but it's only 2 out of 3. The population ISO is really quite rarely still 7.6. You still do better limping for the most part than open folding. And 5-4 off, at least we get some draws post. Mostly we're just looking to be bluffing post now. To get the check back. And this is interesting. So he snap leads. And so I mean, there's some room to raise here as a bluff because this is somewhat weak, but we're quite a bit shallower, and our hand is actually pretty strong. I am just going to be flatting here, and I'm pretty happy just trying to get showdown at this point. We have a gut shot too, so it's not the end of the world. And now I'm going to try to bluff, or value bet, but make it look like a bluff. I'm just trying to decide what sizing looks bluffiest. I'm going to try something maybe like 170. That looks kind of sneaky. Like I don't know, maybe something. I think they're good. Betting big is quite good though, because a lot of his range is sort of folding or not folding. A lot of his range is weighted towards sort of pure bluff catcher. Like he has a pair and he's calling probably, or he doesn't. So as long as we don't shove him off pairs, we're pretty happy. And again, I'm gonna try limp trapping because we're suited. We don't mind getting checked back, and he has ISO shoved a bit, and we've limped quite a lot. And cool, we got a bluff! Yay! Unfortunately, he got there, but what can you do? We did get it in really good with 68% equity, so we're pretty happy about it. All right. Just open shoving here. We're so shallow. And nice long game. And so here, we're 4.4, so I'm just playing Nash. And so, you know, I just pop over to my coffee hut and 7.8, so this is not close. I mean, this is just a snap call. I know it's a snap call, but I figure, you know, it's worth showing. I mean, at this stock depth, it's just, this is the best range to use. Nash calling is the best range to be using. And so, you know, there's no reason not to look at the chart and double check yourself. All right. GG, FC, respect.